Good evening and welcome back. Tonight, we begin a long, slow descent into the deepest, oldest memory of our planet and the story of Earth's oceans. We will trace the quiet gathering of the first water, the slow shaping of the continents, and the deep, warm currents that move perpetually beneath the surface. I invite you to share where you're listening from. Let the atmosphere of your own quiet room tone settle softly around us. Settle in now, find warmth, and soften your breath. Allow the weight of the day's responsibilities to dissolve like salt in the vast ancient sea. Remember, there is nothing to solve, nothing to resist. All the plans and tasks can wait until the morning light. Let my voice be your soft anchor tonight, guiding you into a deep, restful calm. We are drifting back through time to the moment the first clouds formed over the cooling crust, towards the ancient rivers that flowed into the first basins under the deep expanse of the quiet night. Nothing in tonight's story will disturb your peace. Let the gentle greeting settle over you. Now allow yourself a long, slow breath in and out, releasing any lingering tightness. Imagine the air around you is turning soft like mist, balsam, moonlight settling over a still, calm expanse of water. We are entering an ancient, myth-like cadence, where the drama of time has been filtered and softened into serene visuals. Time moves slowly here, measured only by the steady, slow tides of the deepest blue. Our journey will follow the faint, winding currents, ensuring no tension interrupts your drift. If these gentle journeys help you rest, you may leave a soft like or subscribe, only if it feels comforting and natural for your night. Chapter 1. Origins. The quiet rain and the primordial sea. We begin our long narrative at the ultimate origin, the birth of the water itself. This is the ancient background tracing the very first moments, long before life, when our planet was still finding its shape. In the earliest phase, Earth was a quiet, molten sphere, covered in a vast, dense blanket of gases released from the planet's cooling interior. There were no seas, only rock and an immense heavy atmosphere. The water that would one day fill the oceans was suspended high above, held captive as steam. The origin of this water is a soft, deep mystery, a combination of forces. Some water was locked within the planet's minerals, slowly outgassed from the cooling mantle, through ancient, slow volcanic vents. More water arrived, gently, quietly carried from the cold reaches of space by celestial bodies, comets, and asteroids that impacted the young Earth, seeding the surface with ice. This delivery was not a sharp, violent event, but a long, steady contribution of frozen, drifting light over millions of years. As the Earth's crust finally cooled enough, the temperature of the atmosphere dropped below the critical point, and the immense volume of steam began to condense. Imagine the magnitude, the beginning of the Great Rain. This was not a fleeting shower, but a slow, continuous deluge that lasted for millennia. The rain fell gently, steadily filling the deepest depressions and basins on the planet's uneven surface. This persistent, unhurried precipitation was the moment of formation. For the first water bodies, the primordial sea, the early ocean was not salty but warm, shallow, and acidic, containing dissolved gases and minerals from the cooling crust and the continuous volcanic outgassing. This vast, warm expanse of water was the true ancient root of the Earth's history, covering much of the surface. The legacy of this quiet beginning is profound. The ocean became the softening filter for the planet's volatile early conditions. The water began to dissolve atmospheric carbon dioxide, cooling the planet and stabilizing the environment, allowing the long, slow geological and chemical processes to begin. The vast water bodies were interconnected, flowing and mixing, creating a uniform, deep blue blanket. This ocean was utterly silent, devoid of biological stress or noise, waiting patiently for the long, slow, quiet process of life's emergence to begin in its warm depths. The rhythmic sound of the ancient rivers flowing into the newborn ocean was the only constant rhythm. Let the image of that slow, immense rain filling the deep basins of the young Earth settle over you now. Chapter 2. Origins. The quiet birth of the ocean floor. The continuous great rain filled the first basins, establishing the primordial ocean. But the origins of the ocean were also deeply tied to the cooling and shifting material beneath the water's surface, the ocean floor itself. This geological ancient background was a long, slow process of planetary differentiation. Beneath the warm, shallow water, the Earth's crust began to solidify. This crust was not uniform. It quickly divided into two distinct materials, the lighter, thicker continental crust, granitic, and the denser, thinner, oceanic crust, basaltic. The oceanic crust was born along a vast, continuous system of undersea mountains known as mid-ocean ridges. Imagine these ridges as long, quiet, slow-moving seams in the Earth's surface. Along these seams, hot, molten rock from the mantle slowly rises and solidifies, gently pushing the existing crust away. This process, known as seafloor spreading, is the true origin of the deep ocean floor. This process was intensely slow, a continuous geological formation that unfolded over hundreds of millions of years. The creation of new crust along the ridges and the slow descent of old crust into deep trenches ensured that the ocean basins were perpetually reshaped, creating the topography that dictates the flow of the slow tides. The crust moved with the gentle footsteps of tectonic forces measured in mere centimeters per year. Crucially, the early ocean environment developed its unique chemistry during this phase. As water circulated through the hot rock along the mid-ocean ridges, it dissolved minerals and gases, contributing to the ocean's initial saltiness. This circulation established the hydrothermal vent systems deep in the silent darkness, where mineral-rich water heated by magma spewed forth. These vents became the first quiet, chemically rich niches in the dark environment. The vast majority of the primordial sea remained a uniform, silent space covered in the darkness of the early atmosphere. But along the edges, where the lighter continental crust began to form and consolidate, the water deepened, carving out the first true ocean basins. The legacy of this phase is the fundamental structure of our planet, the clear division between continent and ocean. The water, by cooling the surface and lubricating the movement of the tectonic plates, became the essential agent in the physical formation of the Earth's surface. The constant, unhurried creation and destruction of the seafloor established a perpetual geological rhythm that continues to this day. Let the imagery of the deep, slow flow of molten rock beneath the vast, still primordial sea guide you deeper into rest. Chapter 3. Early Journeys. The first continents and the soft currents. With the primordial ocean established and the quiet process of seafloor spreading underway, the water bodies began their early journeys of mixing and circulation driven by external forces. This was the era where the first stable small continents began to emerge from the deep blue. The first continents were small, gentle aggregations of lighter crust, forming stable landmasses known as cratons. These continents, constantly shifting with the movement of the tectonic plates, began to define the boundaries of the great global water body. This was not a sharp, defining moment, but a slow tide of geological consolidation. The early journeys of the ocean. Water itself were driven by the planet's rotation and the uneven heating from the young sun. This established the first essential ocean currents. Imagine these currents as vast, deep, slow-moving rivers within the ocean itself, silently carrying heat and minerals across the globe. These currents performed a critical function. They acted as a softening filter for the global environment, distributing heat from the warmer equatorial regions toward the poles. This quiet circulation prevented extreme temperature variations, providing a more stable environment for the long, slow chemical formation of life. The entire global water system was finding its rhythm. Meanwhile, the early ocean atmosphere was being gently shaped by the continuous chemical interaction between the water and the rock. The high acidity of the early sea, caused by dissolved volcanic gases, slowly began to neutralize, as minerals weathered from the young continental crust flowed into the basins. This process was a quiet, necessary evolution of the water's chemistry. The legacy of these early continents was that they created the first coastal environments, the shallow sunlit zones where land and sea meet. These areas bathed in sunlight and rich in mineral runoff from the land became the true origins of biological complexity. The sunlight provided the energy, the mineral runoff provided the building blocks, and the stable shallow water provided the necessary protection from the deep, dark ocean. The movement of the tectonic plates meant that these early continents periodically collided, forming vast supercontinents. The ocean basins would close, forcing the water into new configurations, only to open again millions of years later. This continuous, unhurried cycle of formation and dissolution was the defining rhythm of the planet's early history. The entire planet was governed by the gentle footsteps of these immense ancient forces. The slow tectonic movement, the gradual chemical evolution, and the pervasive mixing of the water. The deep ocean remained a silent, dark space, while the shallow coasts quietly prepared the stage for life's next monumental turning point. Chapter 4. Turning Points. The oxygen shift and the long freeze. The slow, continuous circulation of the early ocean and the weathering of the first continents quietly led to the first monumental turning point in the Earth's history. The Great Oxidation Event, GOE, often viewed as the single most profound environmental transformation our planet has ever undergone. This shift was a profound, quiet evolution, driven by the emergence of the first successful photosynthetic life microscopic organisms, mainly cyanobacteria, floating peacefully in the shallow sunlit surface waters. Imagine these tiny, simple cells absorbing the sunlight and utilizing the abundant carbon dioxide, releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This was not a sharp, violent event, but a gradual, relentless softening filter on the atmosphere. Initially, the oxygen released was absorbed by the dissolved iron in the early oceans, leading to the formation of vast layers of banded iron formations, a quiet geological archive preserved in the ancient dust of the seabed. Once the iron reservoirs were saturated, the excess oxygen began to bubble out of the water and accumulate in the atmosphere. This accumulation of free oxygen was a turning point because it was fundamentally toxic to the existing anaerobic life forms which had evolved in a zero-oxygen environment. This shift was a massive symbolic change that forced an evolutionary bottleneck, leading to the demise of many early life forms. However, we view this as a necessary quiet process of chemical purification, setting the stage for the later warm breath of complex life. The second monumental turning point was the snowball Earth period, or periods occurring roughly 700 to 600 million years ago. This was a direct, albeit delayed, consequence of the GOE. The rising atmospheric oxygen reacted with methane, a potent greenhouse gas, weakening the Earth's ability to retain heat. This, combined with the continuous drift of continents into critical positions, triggered immense global cooling. Imagine the long freeze as a gentle metaphor for planetary hibernation. The oceans, once vast and blue, were slowly enveloped by miles of thick ice, extending all the way to the equator. This ice cover effectively shut down the communication between the atmosphere and the ocean, creating immense cold stability beneath the ice. This was a profound turning point for the oceans. Photosynthesis on the surface ceased, but geological activity continued. Deep-sea hydrothermal vents remained active, acting as low embers of warmth and chemical energy, providing quiet refuges for life to persist. The oceans became a vast, dark, cold reservoir, waiting patiently. The eventual end of the snowball Earth period was equally quiet and immense. Volcanic activity continuous beneath the ice slowly released carbon dioxide, trapping heat and eventually melting the global ice sheet. This release triggered a period of rapid warming and intense chemical change in the ocean, initiating a second powerful surge of biological formation. The legacy of these turning points is clear. The oceans are the ultimate regulators of the global climate, capable of undergoing immense transformations. that fundamentally redefine the planet's destiny. Chapter 5. Early Journeys. The Cambrian Bloom and the Shelf Seas. The massive cold stability of snowball Earth eventually gave way to a rapid warming, initiating a new phase of early journeys defined by the spectacular emergence of complex multicellular life. The Cambrian explosion, about 40 million years ago. The oceans, now warm and rich in oxygen and nutrients released during the thaw, became the ultimate laboratory for life. This was not a sharp, aggressive event, but a profound, accelerated formation of biological diversity. Imagine the shallow waters, the shelf seas, as the ideal environment bathed in drifting light from the sun, oxygenated by the newly complex microbial communities and warmed by the global climate. The early journeys of life focused on developing hard parts, shells, exoskeletons, and skeletal structures made of calcium carbonate and silica. This quiet evolution marked a fundamental change, providing defense structural support and the ability to move and hunt more effectively. The seafloor, once covered only in microbial mats, now saw the gentle footsteps of early segmented creatures, arthropods, and early chordates. The oceans during this time were characterized by the vast expanse of the shelf seas. These were wide, shallow areas of water covering the edges of the stable-growing continents. These shallow seas became the engine of biological diversity, providing immense stable habitat where light penetrated deep, supporting robust food webs based on photosynthesis. The stability of the shelf seas was crucial. The slow tides and currents kept the water circulating, distributing oxygen and nutrients without the stress of deep, cold water upwelling. The continuous flow of mineral-rich water from the continents contributed to the abundant calcium required for the new hardshells. The movement of the continents continued, but the ocean's legacy was the biological continuity. Life, once established, persisted through geological time. The continuous mixing of the water ensured that biological innovations in one area could be distributed across the globe, creating a unified biosphere within the oceans. The distant night of the Precambrian, dominated by simple single-celled life, gave way to a vibrant multi-layered ecosystem in the warm, shallow seas. The oceans, once merely the solvent for Earth's chemistry, had now become the cradle for nearly every major animal body plan that exists today. This immense quiet bloom was the greatest softening filter on the planet's biological future. Chapter 6. Early Journeys. The Age of Fish and the Continental Drift. The spectacular Cambrian bloom established the biological diversity of the oceans. The subsequent phase of early journeys spanning the Paleozoic era, say 540 to 252 million years ago, was characterized by the quiet, systematic evolution of life in the water and the immense slow movements of the continental masses. This era is often known as the Age of Fish, as vertebrates. With backbones began their unhurried journey of diversification in the vast water bodies. The early armored fish, moving with gentle footsteps through the warm, shallow seas, represented a crucial biological formation and the development of the internal skeletal structure that would define all higher life forms. The continuous early journeys of the continents were simultaneously reshaping the ocean basins. The scattered land masses of the Cambrian began to drift together, eventually forming the supercontinent Pangaea. This process involved the slow, persistent closing and opening of ocean basins. Closing basins, as plates converged, vast oceans were compressed, leading to the formation of immense mountain ranges, a quiet stone upheaval, and the deepening of trenches. Opening basins, the forces of spreading crust, created new vast oceans, constantly altering global current patterns and sea levels. This geological transformation had a profound impact on the ocean environment. When the continents were mostly scattered, the oceans were wide and shallow, supporting immense shelf seas. As the continents began to aggregate toward Pangaea, the total length of the coastline decreased, and the vast, shallow, sunlit shelf seas shrank. This process was a continuous, subtle softening filter on the global habitat, forcing marine life to adapt to changing sea levels and temperatures. The legacy of this continental drift was the constant redistribution of marine species. As ocean basins closed, species populations were forced into competition, leading to accelerated evolution and adaptation. When oceans opened, species were separated, leading to the development of unique, localized life forms. The oceans acted as an immense, slow-moving biological blender. The dominant biological flow remained in the water, as the first ventures onto land were just beginning. The warm breath of life in the shallow seas grew richer. Complex coral reefs began to form, creating stable, intricate habitats. And the first marine reptiles and amphibians began their own tentative, quiet explorations between the sea and the land. Throughout this immense time, the deep ocean remained a silent, vast space, its mysteries largely untouched by the shallow water biological boom. The slow tides and deep currents continued their perpetual, unhurried circulation, acting as the enduring thermostat for the changing climate powered by the constant, distant night of the seabed. Chapter 7. Turning Points. The Permian extinction and the Great Remaking, the long continuous consolidation of Pangaea, the supercontinent, reached its maximum extent, leading directly to the most catastrophic turning point in the ocean's history. The Permian-Triassic extinction event, often referred to as the Great Dying. 252 million years ago, this event was a massive planetary-scale softening filter that wiped out over 90% of all marine species, fundamentally resetting the biological clock of the oceans. We view this not as a sharp, sudden natural disaster, but as a long, slow accumulation of environmental stress triggered by immense geological activity. The origin of this turning point is rooted in the immense volcanic activity of the Siberian Traps, vast eruptions that lasted for millions of years. This continuous release of gases and magma acted as a profound, slow-motion shockwave to the global environment. The effects on the oceans were profound and complex, leading to a breakdown of the deep-sea circulation established in the early journey's ocean warming. The massive influx of volcanic carbon dioxide triggered extreme global warming, slowly heating the vast ocean water bodies. Ocean acidification. The increased absorption of atmospheric CO2 led to a gradual, persistent increase in the acidity of the surface waters. This chemical shift acted as a relentless, invisible force that made it difficult for organisms to build and maintain their calcium carbonate shells and skeletons. Anoxia, loss of oxygen. The warmer water held less dissolved oxygen, and the immense influx of decaying organic matter created vast, deep zones of anoxia areas where oxygen was completely depleted. This led to the formation of dead zones in the deeper waters. This combination of warming, acidification, and anoxia was a catastrophic turning point for the marine ecosystems. Entire groups of complex life, especially those thriving in the cool, oxygenated deep waters and those relying on external shells, simply vanished. The vibrant age of fish yielded to a deep, profound silence in the water. The legacy of the Great Dying was the profound remaking of the ocean's biological structure. The few surviving species had immense resilience and adaptability. The oceans, now biologically sparse and chemically stressed, entered a long, slow phase of formation known as the Triassic period, waiting patiently for life to rediversify. The supercontinent Pangaea, which had contributed to the extinction by reducing the vast stable shelf seas, was already beginning its slow, unhurried fracture. This new geological evolution would soon create new ocean basins and a return to the wide, shallow coastal environments necessary for biological recovery. The distant night of the deep ocean was now profoundly still, echoing the memory of immense loss. Chapter 8. Early Journeys. The Age of Reptiles and the Tethys Sea. The quiet, massive biological reset of the Permian extinction cleared the stage for the next phase of early journeys, spanning the Mesozoic era, AEC. 252 to 66 million years ago, often known as the Age of Reptiles. This period was characterized by the breakup of Pangaea and the serene creation of new vast oceans, which profoundly shaped global climate and marine life. The long, slow fracture of the supercontinent Pangaea began a process we view as a continuous, immense geological evolution. As the continental plates pulled apart, new ocean basins slowly opened, flooding the margins of the landmasses. The most famous of these new formations was the Tethys Sea. Imagine the Tethys Sea as a warm, shallow tropical ocean that stretched across the equator, separating the northern continent's Laurasia from the southern continent's Gondwana. This vast, warm expanse of water acted as a massive softening filter for the global climate. Its equatorial position ensured that the warm breath of tropical water was efficiently distributed globally, maintaining high stable temperatures across the planet. This stability, coupled with the slow creation of immense new shelf seas along the newly forming continental margins, provided the perfect environment for the biological recovery following the Great Dying. The oceans saw a rapid evolution of new life forms, particularly the marine reptiles. Giant ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs, moving with gentle footsteps through the immense water bodies, became the dominant predators, replacing the ancient fish that had vanished in the Permian. The legacy of the Tethys Sea is profound. Its warm waters fostered massive deposits of calcium carbonate, limestone, and oil. Over millions of years, the shells and skeletons of marine organisms settling on the quiet seafloor created the foundations of immense oil and gas reserves that would be discovered much later. This was the silent, unhurried accumulation of biological formation. The deep ocean remained vast and largely silent, but the increased oxygen levels and the constant circulation of the Tethys currents ensured a stable, predictable marine ecosystem. The slow tides and deep currents performed their perpetual function, acting as the enduring planetary thermostat. The long geological journey of separation and the continuous quiet movement of the land masses set the stage for the creation of the 5 distinct oceans we recognize today. Chapter 9. Early Journeys. The Age of Dinosaurs and the Pacific begins. The immense geological forces that fractured Pangaea into separate continents, opening the warm Tethys Sea, characterized the long, early journeys of the Mesozoic era. This was the age of dinosaurs on land, and simultaneously the quiet, immense birth of the Pacific Ocean, and the largest and oldest of the water bodies we know today. As the continents drifted apart, the forces pulling them created a continuous area of seafloor spreading that began the formation of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. This slow, persistent separation meant that the existing global ocean which surrounded Pangaea was slowly consumed. The ocean basins are continuously being reshaped. The Pacific Ocean, or parts of it, is a massive legacy of this ancient global water body. It began to take its immense shape as the other continents moved away from it. Its geological structure is unique. It is mostly surrounded by subduction zones, deep oceanic trenches, where old, dense oceanic crust is slowly forced back down into the Earth's mantle. This vast ring of geological activity is known as the Ring of Fire. Imagine the Ring of Fire as a vast, quiet boundary where the oldest parts of the seafloor are continuously being recycled. This process is intensely slow and methodical, characterized by occasional immense, quiet stone upheaval. But its long-term effect is the deepening and reshaping of the Pacific Basin. The deep trenches are the profound scars of this continuous process, acting as silent reservoirs for the oldest water. Biologically, the marine reptiles that dominated the Tethys Sea continued their evolutionary journey. The oceans became increasingly specialized with new forms of plankton and early bony fish emerging. This biological diversification was a continuous, subtle evolution, keeping pace with the changing geography. The warm breath of the Tethys Sea stretching across the equator ensured that the global climate remained warm and stable. allowing the marine ecosystems to thrive without the stress of polar ice caps. The slow tides and currents, now navigating a more complex array of continental shapes, were the consistent carriers of heat and life. The legacy of this long phase of continental drift is the immense, quiet magnitude of the Pacific. It holds the oldest, deepest crust on Earth, a vast and silent archive of the planet's history. Its constant geological activity ensures that the deep ocean floor remains a dynamic yet deeply ancient space. Chapter 10. Turning Points. The Cretaceous Extinction and the Post-Extinction Warmth. The immense geological reshaping and biological diversification of the Mesozoic era reached its definitive turning point with the Cretaceous-Paleogene KPG extinction event, where you were 66 million years ago. This event, which profoundly reset the planet's terrestrial life, also brought significant, though less absolute, changes to the oceans. We view this event not as a sharp catastrophe, but as a vast, powerful softening filter on the global biosphere triggered by the impact of a large asteroid in the Yucatan Peninsula. The immediate effect was a rapid, immense atmospheric shock, plunging the Earth into a temporary period of darkness and cooling. The effects on the ocean, though immense, unfolded with a subtle, tragic slowness. Plankton collapse. The darkness quickly led to the collapse of photosynthesis in the surface waters, the phytoplankton. Since phytoplankton form the base of the entire marine food web, their sudden massive die-off created a distant echo of famine that propagated up the food chain. Marine reptile loss. The large dominant marine reptiles, ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs that had defined the Mesozoic ocean were unable to survive this rapid biological shift and vanished, creating a profound biological vacuum. This turning point was a crucial moment of remaking for the oceans. While over 50% of marine species were lost, the deep ocean fauna and many established groups of fish crustaceans and mollusks survived, demonstrating a resilience built over hundreds of millions of years of early journeys. The long-term legacy of the KPG event was the subsequent post-extinction warmth of the Paleogene period. The environmental shock eventually subsided, leading the planet into a sustained gradual period of global warmth. This warm climate was crucial for the biological formation that followed. Imagine the slow tides and currents moving through water bodies that were once again free from the stress of deep polar ice caps. The oceans were warm from the surface to the seafloor, ensuring a high degree of heat distribution and circulation. This environment provided the perfect conditions for the surviving marine life, particularly fish and mammals, to rapidly diversify and fill the ecological niches left empty by the giant reptiles. This period was the beginning of the age of mammals on land, and simultaneously the quiet, profound evolution of the ocean's mammalian life. Early whales and dolphins, moving with gentle footsteps from the land back into the water, began their long journey of aquatic adaptation, taking advantage of the abundant food sources and the benign warm climate. The quiet stone of the seafloor was now receiving the sediment of a new era, chemically and biologically distinct from the age of the dinosaurs. The oceans, having endured the profound planetary reset, were ready to nurture the immense life forms that would eventually define the modern era. Chapter 11. Early Journeys. The rise of the Atlantic and Arctic basins. The immense turning point of the KPG extinction and the subsequent global warming of the Paleogene set the stage for the early journeys that finalized the physical formation of our modern ocean system. This phase, spanning the Cenozoic era, was characterized by the immense quiet birth of the Atlantic and Arctic Ocean basins. The slow, continuous fracture of the supercontinent Pangaea, which began in the Mesozoic, accelerated. The plates separating North America and Europe and South America and Africa continued to pull apart along the mid-Atlantic ridge. Imagine this ridge as an immense single continuous seam running down the center of the Atlantic. Along this seam, new oceanic crust is perpetually and gently formed, pushing the continents outward. The Atlantic Ocean basin was born from this slow spreading Unlike the ancient deep Pacific, the Atlantic is younger, narrower, and its margins are characterized by passive continental margins, wide stable shelf seas that offer vast sunlit habitat for marine life. This continuous formation makes the Atlantic a primary regulator of global climate. Its narrowness and depth facilitate the meridional overturning circulation (MOC), the deep sea conveyor belt that transfers heat from the equator to the poles. Simultaneously, the northern continents continued to drift, eventually creating the enclosed polar Arctic Ocean basin. This basin is uniquely characterized by its shallow shelves and its immense persistent ice cover, though this ice cover is a later geological feature. The Arctic acts as a quiet cold regulator, exchanging heat and fresh water with the North Atlantic through crucial deep channels. The continuous opening of these basins had a profound legacy on the slow tides and global circulation. As the continents moved into their current positions, the vast equatorial Tethys Sea closed, and new gateways opened, most significantly, the Drake Passage between South America and Antarctica. The opening of the Drake Passage was a crucial, powerful turning point. It allowed the immense cold waters surrounding Antarctica to circulate freely, unhindered by land masses. This initiated the Antarctic Circumpolar Current (ACC), the largest ocean current system on Earth. The ACC effectively isolated Antarctica from warmer currents, leading to the rapid long-term formation of the modern polar ice sheets. The creation of the massive polar ice sheets was a profound legacy for the entire ocean system. It locked up vast amounts of fresh water, leading to a long-term global drop in sea level and a pronounced cooling trend across the planet. The oceans, once entirely warm, now had two vast cold reservoirs, the Antarctic and the Arctic, providing the necessary thermal gradient to drive the deep sea currents. The warm breath of the equatorial seas was now balanced by the immense cold distant night of the polar waters, establishing the modern intricate rhythm of the global ocean circulation. Chapter 12. Turning Points. The Isthmus Closure and the Ice Age Rhythm. The final geological turning point that cemented the modern ocean structure occurred with the closure of the Central American Seaway. The Isthmus of Panama, a gentle yet monumental geological event that initiated the recurring rhythm of the ice ages. As the North and South American plates drifted toward their current positions, the narrow seaway that had long connected the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans began to slowly close. This closure was not a sharp, violent event, but a continuous, immense geological formation that unfolded over millions of years, finally culminating roughly 3 million years ago. The legacy of this closure was a complete and profound evolution of the global ocean circulation patterns. Before the closure, the equatorial waters could flow freely between the two oceans, mixing temperatures and stabilizing climate. Once the seaway closed, the warm saline waters of the North Atlantic were blocked from flowing west into the Pacific. This blockage forced the North Atlantic waters northward, creating an intensification of the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream delivered immense amounts of heat and moisture to the high northern latitudes. This process, a powerful softening filter for the climate of Europe and North America, paradoxically created the necessary conditions for the formation of massive northern ice sheets. The abundant moisture fed the ice sheets, and the heat delivery led to immense recurring cycles of glaciation. The initiation of the quaternary glaciations, the ice ages, was the ultimate turning point driven by the ocean. We view the ice ages not as continuous natural disaster, but as a long, repeating rhythm, a geological heartbeat. The oceans became the primary engine of this rhythm, with deep sea currents switching between warm and cold phases, responding to the growth and retreat of the continental ice sheets. The constant change in sea level, of the slow tides advancing and retreating across the shallow shelf seas, was the most profound and continuous legacy of the ice ages. During peak glacial periods, vast amounts of water were locked up in the continental ice, causing global sea levels to drop by over 120 meters. This exposed immense tracts of land, creating land bridges like the Bering Strait and radically altering coastal ecosystems. During warmer interglacial periods, the water returned, submerging the coasts. The oceans therefore entered a phase of immense continuous but predictable stress. The deep currents continued their meridional overturning circulation MOC, acting as the planet's thermostat, but now switching between modes, accelerating and decelerating the pace of warming and cooling. The final legacy of this phase is the constant subtle change that defines our modern coastlines. The quiet stone of the continental shelves was repeatedly submerged and exposed, shaping the geological and biological memory of the world. Chapter 13. Early Journeys, the Age of Whales and the Deep Sea Conveyor. The initiation of the Ice Age rhythm, driven by the closure of the Isthmus of Panama and the opening of the Drake Passage, firmly established the conditions for the early journeys of the modern ocean. This phase spanning the Quaternary period was characterized by the profound biological formation of the great whales and the final intricate structuring of the deep sea currents. The cooling trend and the increased nutrient upwelling caused by the Ice Age cycles created incredibly productive ocean environments. This abundance of food, particularly small, schooling fish and krill, provided the necessary biological fuel for the immense evolution of the great whales. Imagine the early whale ancestors having returned to the water after the KPG extinction, slowly growing in size and specializing in filter feeding, navigating the vast oceans with gentle footsteps. The blue whale, the largest creature on Earth, is a legacy of this cold, productive phase. Their immense size is an adaptation to the cold, nutrient-rich polar waters, allowing them to store energy efficiently for their long annual migration routes that follow the slow tides of krill abundance from the poles to the warmer breeding grounds. Simultaneously, the vast ocean currents finalize their structure, creating the deep sea conveyor belt, formerly the meridional overturning circulation, or MOC. This is the most critical element of the modern ocean's formation. Imagine the MOC as a massive, continuous global river flowing entirely beneath the surface. It is driven by thermohaline circulation differences in temperature thermo and salinity haline. This process works with quiet, systematic perfection, sinking in the North Atlantic. Warm, salty water from the Gulf Stream reaches the polar region, where it is intensely cooled by the atmosphere. As it cools, it becomes denser and sinks, forming the North Atlantic Deepwater NADW flow. This massive volume of cold, dense water flows southward deep beneath the warmer surface currents, crossing the equator and mixing with equally cold water sinking off Antarctic bottom water, or AABW, upwelling. This deep, cold, nutrient-rich water slowly flows through the Pacific and Indian Oceans, eventually rising to the surface, upwelling thousands of years later, bringing vital nutrients to the sunlit zones. This MOC acts as the planetary softening filter, distributing heat, oxygen, and nutrients across the entire globe. The sheer magnitude of this immense, unhurried flow, moving water at a speed measured in centuries, is the ultimate legacy of the Earth's oceans, ensuring that the warm breath of the tropics balances the distant night of the deep sea. The early journeys of the great whales and the perpetual slow motion of the MOC are the defining characteristics of the oceans in which we live today. A system of immense quiet complexity built on billions of years of geological and biological refinement. Chapter 14. Turning Points. The climate oscillations and the shifting shores. The rhythmic flow of the ice ages, established by the immense geological formation of the continents and the deep sea conveyor, led to continuous quiet turning points, driven by climate oscillations. These periods of rapid yet predictable change in sea level profoundly shaped the shallow coastal environments where human civilization would later emerge. We view these climate oscillations not as destructive natural disaster, but as a long, slow geological softening filter acting upon the coastlines. The cycles of glacial advance and retreat were caused by subtle shifts in the Earth's orbit and tilt-Milankovitch cycles, creating a periodic legacy of temperature change. During glacial periods, ice ages, immense volumes of water were locked up in vast continental ice sheets, causing global sea levels to drop by as much as 120 meters. This drop created vast, exposed coastal plains known as shelflands. Imagine these periods as immense, quiet migrations, the slow tides receding, revealing new fertile tracts of land and creating land bridges like the Bering Strait that connected continents and allowed for the gentle footsteps of terrestrial life forms and eventually early humans to move between land masses. During interglacial periods, warm periods like the present day, the ice sheets slowly melted, returning the water to the oceans. This caused the sea levels to rise, gradually flooding the coastal plains and forming the wide, shallow shelf seas we know today. This was a continuous, subtle evolution of the coastline. The oceans became the primary engine of these turning points. The deep-sea conveyor acted as the thermal switch. When it flowed strongly, it distributed heat and kept the North Atlantic region relatively warm. When it weakened or stalled due to influxes of fresh meltwater capping the sinking zone, it triggered rapid localized cooling and climate change. The legacy of this long, repeating rhythm is profound. It created the coastal instability that characterizes the modern ocean environment. Coastlines were constantly submerged and revealed, forcing marine and terrestrial life into continuous adaptation. The vast shelf seas created during the warmer periods are immensely important because they receive abundant drifting light and nutrient runoff from the land, making them the most biologically productive zones on Earth, the nursery grounds for most marine fish and invertebrates. The quiet stone of the continental shelf holds the sedimentary record of these cycles, a geological archive of life, moving and adapting to the relentless, unhurried advance and retreat of the water. This continuous flow and change ensured that the oceans remained a perpetually dynamic, yet structurally stable global system. Chapter 15. Early Journeys. The Age of Whales and the Deep-Sea Conveyor Revisit. The profound turning point initiated by the Ice Age rhythm and the final geological closure of the seaways established the conditions for the modern early journeys of the ocean ecosystem. This phase, spanning the past few million years, is characterized by the immense quiet biological formation of the great whales and the final intricate structuring of the deep-sea currents. The persistent cooling trend and the subsequent nutrient upwelling driven by the Ice Age cycles created incredibly productive ocean environments, particularly in the polar and subpolar regions. This abundance of small schooling fish and krill provided the necessary biological fuel for the immense evolution of the great whales. Imagine the early whale ancestors having returned to the water after the Cape Age extinction, slowly growing in size and specializing in filter feeding, navigating the vast oceans with gentle footsteps. The blue whale, the largest creature on Earth, is a legacy of this cold, productive phase. Their immense size is an adaptation to the cold, nutrient-rich polar waters, allowing them to store energy efficiently for their long annual migration routes that follow the slow tides of krill abundance from the poles to the warmer breeding grounds. This specialization into vast migratory patterns ensures the continuous redistribution of biomass across the entire ocean system. Simultaneously, the vast ocean currents finalize their structure, creating the deep-sea conveyor belt. Formally, the meridional overturning circulation, or MOSI. This is the most critical element of the modern ocean's formation. Imagine the Mach as a massive, continuous global river flowing entirely beneath the surface. It is driven by thermohaline circulation differences in temperature thermo and salinity haline. This process works with quiet, systematic perfection. Sinking in the North Atlantic, warm, salty water from the Gulf Stream reaches the polar region, where it is intensely cooled by the atmosphere. As it cools, it becomes denser and sinks, forming the North Atlantic deep water, NADW. Flow. This massive volume of cold, dense water flows southward deep beneath the warmer surface currents, crossing the equator and mixing with equally cold waters sinking off Antarctica and Arctic bottom water, or AABW, upwelling. This deep, cold, nutrient-rich water slowly flows through the Pacific and Indian Oceans, eventually rising to the surface, upwelling thousands of years later, bringing vital nutrients to the sunlit zones. This moss acts as the planetary softening filter, distributing heat, oxygen, and nutrients across the entire globe. The sheer magnitude of this immense, unhurried flow, moving water at a speed measured in centuries, is the ultimate legacy of the Earth's oceans, ensuring that the warm breath of the tropics balances the distant night of the deep sea. The early journeys of the great whales and the perpetual slow motion of the Maquis are the defining characteristics of the oceans in which we live today. A system of immense quiet complexity built on billions of years of geological and biological refinement. Chapter 16. Turning Points. The thermal switch and the Arctic freeze. The rhythmic dance of the ice ages, driven by the deep sea conveyor belt MOC, introduced the most crucial turning point within the modern oceanic system. The thermal switch mechanism and the eventual profound isolation of the Arctic Ocean. The MOC acts as a powerful thermal pump, delivering immense heat to the North Atlantic region. We view this process as a delicate, immense balancing act, highly sensitive to the influx of fresh water. During intense glacial periods, the massive continental ice sheets would periodically surge or melt rapidly, dumping vast amounts of cold, fresh water into the North Atlantic. This influx of less dense fresh water acted as a softening filter on the sinking process. Fresh water is less dense than salty water, preventing the surface water from cooling enough to sink and form the North Atlantic deep water NADW. This slowdown, or complete stalling of the MOC, is the thermal switch. Imagine the warm breath of the Gulf Stream being cut off. When the MOC slows, the heat transfer to the high northern latitudes diminishes dramatically, triggering a rapid, profound cooling phase across the northern hemisphere. This was a continuous, subtle evolution that drove the immense, rapid climate fluctuations observed in the geological record of the ice ages. The second profound turning point was the Arctic freeze. As the continents drifted toward their current configuration, the Arctic Ocean became increasingly landlocked, separated from the warmer Atlantic currents by the relatively shallow North Atlantic Ridge and the narrow Bering Strait. This geographical isolation, coupled with the long-term cooling trend, allowed the Arctic Ocean to enter its current phase of deep, persistent freezing. The vast expanse of sea ice, which we view as a continuous formation process, became the ultimate regulator of the region. The presence of this perennial sea ice creates a critical legacy known as the albedo effect. Ice reflects immense amounts of solar drifting light back into space. This reflective property ensures that the Arctic remains cold, creating a self-sustaining cooling mechanism. The Arctic acts as the planet's primary cold reservoir, profoundly influencing atmospheric circulation and global weather patterns. The quiet night of the Arctic, covered by its vast ice sheet, represents the final successful geological softening filter that created the modern thermally differentiated ocean system. The warm, circulating waters of the tropics are now permanently balanced by the vast, cold, and quiet waters of the poles, their temperatures maintained by the interplay between the deep currents and the reflective ice cover. Chapter 18. Turning Points. The first maritime explorations. The long, quiet rhythm of the oceans, its thermal balance secured by the deep-sea conveyor and its shores constantly reformed by the ice ages, remained largely untouched by humanity for millennia. This era began the turning points, where human influence driven by curiosity and necessity extended beyond the immediate coastal fringe and onto the vast surface waters. The earliest, most profound early journeys into the open sea were not driven by unified empires, but by isolated, resilient cultures. We view these explorations not as aggressive conquests, but as immense, methodical softening filters of geography, shrinking the vastness of the Pacific and Atlantic. One of the most remarkable of these journeys was the Polynesian expansion across the Pacific. Imagine the gentle footsteps of their double-hulled canoes navigating thousands of miles across the open ocean, guided only by the warm breath of the trade winds and the slow tides and the meticulous reading of the stars and the patterns of the swell. This was a sustained, quiet evolution of navigation, filling the immense void of the Pacific Basin, with human settlement reaching islands as distant as Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island. The Polynesian navigation system was a profound legacy, proving that humans could master the immense, unpredictable surface of the sea. Simultaneously in the West, early Mediterranean cultures, the Phoenicians and later the Greeks, began their own methodical expansion. Their journeys were initially driven by trade and the search for tin, a distant echo of the Bronze Age necessity. They navigated primarily by coastal hugging, staying within sight of the quiet stone of the shoreline, but eventually ventured into the deep waters, mastering the Mediterranean and the Atlantic coastal currents. Their trade routes became the economic arteries of the ancient world. The deep ocean remained a realm of mystery and mythology. The vast, cold, silent waters beyond the continental shelves were referred to as the abyss, a place of profound, tranquil unknown. Early human activity was confined to the surface layer, the upper sunlit waters that received drifting light and were biologically rich. The legacy of these early maritime explorations was the development of coastal cultures whose very survival depended on the sea. Their knowledge of currents, weather patterns, and marine life became deep and specialized, creating a spiritual and practical dependence on the ocean's vast power. This phase of quiet expansion slowly prepared the stage for the next great turning point, the era when the entire globe would be connected by the distant waves of the sea. Chapter 19. Turning Points. The Age of Sail and Global Convergence. The localized early journeys of exploration and trade across the Atlantic and Pacific conducted by the Polynesians and early Europeans set the stage for the final, immense turning point, the Age of Sail, 15th to 17th centuries. This period definitively transformed the oceans from vast, separate basins into a single, interconnected global system under persistent human influence. This shift was driven by European technological evolution, specifically advancements in cartography, shipbuilding, developing hardy multi-masted vessels, and navigation utilizing the astrolabe and magnetic compass. We view these innovations not as aggressive tools, but as gentle metaphors for curiosity and the relentless human desire to find predictable patterns in the distant waves. The greatest and most enduring turning point was the establishment of the global maritime trade network. Explorers venturing across the vast, deep oceans connected the eastern and western hemispheres, initiating the Columbian Exchange. This was a profound planetary-scale softening filter for biology and commerce. Goods, crops, livestock, and inevitably pathogens flowed across the Atlantic and Pacific, creating a truly unified global biosphere. The oceans became the primary economic engine of the world. The slow tides carried immense volumes of silver spices, sugar, and textiles along predictable routes. This massive formation of global commerce created a new type of coastal power. The colonial empires who relied entirely on naval strength to secure their long-distance trade routes. However, the immense human impact on the ocean environment began subtly during this period. The early journeys of exploitation focused primarily on high-value marine mammals. Whaling, driven by the demand for oil and blubber, began as a localized coastal activity, but quickly expanded into the deep ocean. We view this early exploitation as a quiet initial legacy of human industrial reach, extending the stress from the coastal fringe into the remote cold waters. The vast Atlantic Ocean, once a barrier, became the central artery of this new world system. The predictability of the trade winds and currents, which the Polynesians had long utilized in the Pacific, determined the fastest routes for sail. The warm breath of the Gulf Stream and the North Atlantic Gyre became essential silent partners in global commerce. This age of global convergence was the final legacy of the geological formation that created the modern oceans. The narrow, predictable Atlantic and the wide-open Pacific were finally fully utilized, establishing the pattern of global connectivity that continues to define our world. The oceans had ceased to be merely the cradle of life and had become the engine of human history. Chapter 20. Legacy. The long echoes of the water planet. We arrive at the final chapter of our long, slow journey across the immense, timeless volume of the oceans. The age of global exploration is complete, and this final phase focuses on the enduring legacy of the water planet, tracing the profound, quiet echoes the oceans leave on Earth's destiny. The most vital legacy of the oceans is the continuous regulation of Earth's climate and atmosphere. The oceans serve as the largest carbon sink on the planet, absorbing immense volumes of atmospheric carbon dioxide, acting as a massive, quiet softening filter for global temperatures. This chemical regulation, begun during the Great Oxidation Event, continues today, demonstrating the ocean's enduring role as the ultimate planetary thermostat. The Deep Sea Conveyor Belt (MOC) remains the primary physical legacy of ocean dynamics. This immense slow tide of cold, dense water ensures the continuous redistribution of heat, oxygen, and nutrients across the entire globe, supporting marine life from the surface to the abyssal plains. Its predictable, unhurried flow is the essential mechanism that maintains the global climate patterns we rely upon. The ocean also leaves a profound biological legacy. The vast shelf seas and coastal zones, constantly shifting due to ice age cycles, are the most biologically productive areas, supporting the majority of marine fisheries and coastal ecosystems. The complexity and diversity of life in the water, which began with the Cambrian bloom, now represents the ultimate reservoir of the planet's biological wealth. The exploration of the deep ocean and the vast, cold, silent waters that remained untouched during the Age of Sail continues to unfold as a modern early journey. New technologies allow humanity to venture to the abyssal plains and the deep trenches, the oldest, quietest parts of the planet, revealing unique ecosystems thriving on chemosynthesis at hydrothermal vents, a direct echo of the primordial sea. The deep sea remains the last vast frontier of the planet, a realm of perpetual quiet night. The legacy of the ocean in human culture is equally enduring. Its immense rhythmic power remains a gentle metaphor for the unpredictable forces of nature and the source of cultural narratives, commerce, and settlement along the coastal fringe. The distant waves carry the memory of geological time and the persistent strength of nature. The story is complete. The long, deep cycle of water, rock, and life has concluded, leaving behind a world where the vast blue body of water remains the primary source of life and stability. The warm breath of the planet is forever tied to the slow tides of the immense ancient ocean. In this quiet journey tonight, we drifted through the gentle echoes of Earth's oceans. We moved from the quiet reign of its origins and the geological formation of its floor, through the immense turning points of the oxygen shift and the ice ages, to the profound legacy of the deep sea conveyor and the regulation of climate. We followed the rhythms of the water planet from its earliest beginnings to the soft traces they leave behind in the foundations of our world. The story of the oceans reminds us that the greatest forces on Earth operate with immense slowness and patience. True power is found not in speed or noise, but in continuous, quiet persistence, ensuring that chaos is always eventually absorbed and balanced by the enduring circulation of the water. If this peaceful journey brought you ease, you may leave a soft like or whisper in the comments where you'd like to drift next. And now, let the night grow still. Let your breath slow. May sleep come softly and carry you into peaceful rest. Good night.